Maise Chan is a Birmingham-born children's author, now living in Glasgow. She's also the current Dr. Gavin Wallace Fellow, or Writer-in-Residence, at Peter Pan Moat Bray in Scotland, the National Centre for Children's Literature. This July sees the publication of the first in her new Tiger Warrior series, an adventure quest featuring a brilliant cast of magical animal zodiac creatures, deadly demons and spine-tingling spirits. In their recent conversation, Nikki Gamble asked Maisie to begin by telling us a little bit about herself.
I'm in Glasgow, but I'm from Birmingham, as you can probably tell from my accent. And born and bred in Birmingham, I grew up with my parents, Ron and Jean. So I was fostered by them and then adopted. But they fostered lots of Chinese children. So I did feel that I had lots of Chinese influence and food around me. I started writing creatively in 2006. I used to write short stories for adults. And I remember librarians would tell me that my voice was quite good for children. And I got onto Megaphone, which was an Arts Council funded scheme with Leila Rasheed. And that was 2016. And I had a whole year of mentoring with her. We had lots of masterclasses from Patrice Lawrence, Candy Gourlay, Alex Wheatle. And I wrote my first novel, which was for teens at that time, and got an agent. And then I decided to write a middle grade book, which is Danny Chung Does Not Do Maths. I just like to write lots of different types of things, to be honest. I think it's because I'm a Gemini. I like to try different things and be excited by writing. So I've always got loads of projects on the go.
And Danny Chung, which is also about to be published, is very different to the series that we're mainly focusing on today. So one is very much set in the real world and the other draws very heavily on Chinese myth, traditional tale and folklore. I understand that you were also a storyteller at one point.
Yes, so I kind of fell into it around the Beijing Olympics in 2008. I was asked by Emergency Exit Arts, who were doing a big sort of exhibition in Birmingham with the BBC, if I would do some storytelling, oral storytelling, which I'd never done before. And they commissioned a costume for me. So I dressed up as the Chinese goddess Guan Yin, who is the goddess of compassion and mercy. And they commissioned a big kind of swan for me to sit in. And I was like pushed around Birmingham in a swan and told like 5-minute stories. A few of them were about Guan Yin, the goddess, and then one was about 4 dragons. And it was just fun. I would sort of just dress up and feel very goddess-like. So that's where my sort of first foray into Chinese myths came about. And I just really liked the goddess that I used to dress up as, because she had quite an interesting history. She was sort of a Buddhist figure, a bodhisattva, but originally in some cultures, it was a man who then changed into a female form. And sometimes you see her with willow or children or water or on a lotus. And I did feel sort of transformed, actually, when I would put on this outfit. And I feel that I learn a lot about Chinese mythology and culture because I'm adopted. I don't know that stuff naturally. So it's always fun for me to find out more. Makes me feel more Chinese in some way, to dig these stories up and tell them to a modern audience. So yeah.
I want to kind of spend a little bit of time thinking about this body of work that is Chinese myth and folklore. It seems quite complicated to me, but maybe that should be no surprise. China's a huge country, and there must surely have been different stories told in different regions. It's so vast.
Yes, it's huge. And there's different languages and dialects and different cuisine, but people, especially in the UK, they think it's one thing. They think Chineseness is a monolith. But there are some very well-known stories, such as Chang'e, which I haven't told that one yet, but it's about the moon goddess, and she's got this little white rabbit, and Netflix have created this movie Over the Moon, so she's very famous. And then Guan Yin, this goddess, is quite well known in all sort of Chinese diasporas, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and it seems like it's a mishmash of religion, but also stories, like oral stories, like Mulan. I've written a couple of Mulan stories before, and there's different incarnations of Mulan. Like sometimes she's got a brother and sometimes she's got a sister. I think it's kind of like European fairy tales, actually, where when you dig deeper, there's lots of different versions of Cinderella. There's lots of different versions of Red Riding Hood. And it's the same with Asian mythology. Like there's a Vietnamese Cinderella, there's a Korean Cinderella. So maybe it's to do with like archetypes of stories, actually, that lots of different cultures have them. And I've also written a book called Stories from Around the World, which was a collection of myths, legends, and fairy tales. And I found that often, the older stories are very dark. And so you need to rewrite them for a modern audience so that maybe the moral is there, but you're not scaring children.
Yeah.
Some of them are really dark.
You mentioned about a sort of blend of folklore and religion. Are we talking about kind of Buddhism, Taoism, or Confucianism? What feeds into Chinese folklore?
It feels like it's a mixture of all of those things. And when I was in my mid-20s, I went to live in Taipei to learn Mandarin. And my friend took me to a temple once, and I didn't know what kind of temple it was, but I think it was Taoist temple. And there were like lots of statues. And I said, what kind of religion is this? And she was like, oh, it's Taoism, but there's bits of Buddhism. And, there was lots of Confucian temples as well in Taipei. So it felt like it was a mishmash of all these things. And it felt that people would just take what they needed. So lots of people would like burn money and offer things to gods, to make their business better, or they would burn incense. So for me, I've asked Chinese people, if I write about this goddess, am I being respectful? Is that okay? And most people have said yes, because everyone loves her. And she's in lots of stories, like the Monkey King story, The Journey to the West. So she's in that. And there's lots of different stories that she's in. So I do feel, I ask people as well who are British Chinese or Chinese, if I don't know something, I'll go and ask them for their opinion. Yeah.
Interesting.
With the Tiger Warrior, because it's got the Dragon King as the bad guy, I did ask some experts, is it okay if there is a dragon that's a bad guy? Because usually dragons are revered and they're blessed creatures. And I was told yes, that like any sort of creature, there'll be good and bad, and it depends on that personification. But there are so many different creatures. Like if you just Google mythological creatures, you'll get a list of like 50 different creatures who all look really odd, and some have like a bottom for a face and stuff like that. Really odd creatures. But what I did really enjoy finding out was that there would be different dragons. So like Vietnam and China would have different dragons, and Japan would have different dragons, and Korea would have different dragons. They often have a camel head and the body of a serpent and eagle claws. So there's kind of 9 different animals that are put together to make this Chinese dragon.
They're very different, aren't they, from, say, Welsh and English dragons? They don't fly.
So they don't have wings, first of all, and they don't breathe fire, and they're more associated with the seas and the rivers, and they bring water. So if, there's a lot of stories where villagers had a drought and they would like pray to the dragons to help them. So that's one of the stories that I used to tell.
Let's talk about Tiger Warrior, the whole idea, where it came from.
Hashay approached me for this collaboration, and I was really happy to do it because I wanted to write more fantasy, magic and portals and that kind of writing, because my writing is usually contemporary, realism, very much grounded in the real world. And I found that to challenge myself as a writer, as a children's writer, I wanted to do something like this, which is more action-based, more mythological and more imaginative, to be honest, because when I first started writing for children, I didn't think I was that imaginative. And then you see all these books that are doing really well. There's portals and magic and odd characters. And I was like, can I do that? I don't know. I want to. So it was a really good opportunity to have a go at it. And they're a lot of fun to write. And I think when you're a children's author, one of the great things is that you have fun when you write your stories.
Yeah, it really
And this
comes
book.
across. It's an action-packed story. Let's discover a little bit about the two main characters. Well, the main character, first of all, is Jack, isn't it?
Yes, Jack is mixed, so he's British, but he's half Chinese, and his mum's white, and his father has died. But his grandfather, which is yeah in Chinese, so that's what we call him in the book, he passes on this coin, which is magic, and it summons the 12 zodiac animals, and it also opens a portal to the Jade Kingdom, which the Tiger Warrior, who is now Jack, has to protect and look after. So it always begins in the real world and it always ends in the real world. But the middle of the book is in the Jade Kingdom, where every book Jack has to fight an enemy.
Let's talk about these 12 animals of the zodiac. I think one of the things that really comes across, you know, you're straight in there with this story because it's only 100 odd pages, you know, so you have to get right in there. And very quickly you establish characteristics for these so that he can actually build relationships with these animals, which I thought was lovely.
Thank you. Yes, so each animal has a power that Jack has to harness, but also they've got individual character traits that often bring a lot of comedy to the book, which I think sometimes with these action series there's not much humour. It's more about fighting or killing the beasts and stuff like that. But in this book, I use the animals for humour. So, for instance, the rooster just appears when he's not supposed to appear and creates a bit of chaos and stuff like that. Or pigs eating stuff when he's supposed to be battling. So, yeah, it's a good way to get humour into the book.
And he's a novice. So, I mean, it sounds wonderful that he's got 12 animals that who have amazing powers. I mean, the snake lends him the power of invisibility. The tiger, I suppose, is the closest to what could be called like a totem animal for him, as in he's the tiger warrior. So that's the one that he's closest to and has all this kind of fire power. But it's limited, because otherwise you could do anything with these 12 animals.
Yeah. Yeah. So with most children's stories, you want your main character to learn something and go on a journey. So he is the tiger warrior, and every tiger warrior is born in the year of the tiger, which actually my son is. And the book starts with him as a computer gamer, but he has to learn new skills as a tiger warrior. And in this book in particular, he kind of melds those computer skills into the battle at the end. So we have the tiger, which is firepower. So he can like breathe fireballs or throw fireballs. So yeah, it's really action packed, and each animal's really fun and got a different skill. And it gives the series structure as well, because then each book is about something different.
Let's talk about the plot of this story. So the other world that Jack travels to is the Jade Kingdom that you've talked about, and that's ruled over by the Jade Emperor. Now, we've heard about the Jade Emperor from mythology.
Yeah.
Were there other emperors as well?
So the Jade Emperor and the Dragon King, actually, they're sort of archetypal characters. So there's different incarnations of the Dragon King, and I imagine that the same with the Jade Emperor. So it's not like he's got a name, it's a kind of position. And in this book, he rules the heavenly realm, which is connected to Earth. And if the heavenly realm gets defeated, then Earth is next. So that's why Jack needs to be the Tiger Warrior and protect the Jade Kingdom. And Princess Li is the Jade Emperor's daughter, and she has magical powers too, and she can transform into the Feng Huang, which is the phoenix, the Chinese phoenix, and she's like a fierce phoenix bird in the book. And she's his age, she's Jack's age, so that gives you two protagonists which the reader can identify with. And the Jade Emperor, even though he is all powerful, actually he needs their help in the book. So it gives the children, the characters, but also the readers, that agency to do something. And then the Dragon King is a reoccurring villain So he's the main villain of the first book, but then as the series goes along, there'll be different villains, but he's always in the background as well.
And a lot of humour comes through the relationship of Princess Lee and Jack too.
Yeah, so she's obviously grown up in the Jade Kingdom and he's grown up in contemporary Britain. So their understanding of each other is a little bit skewed because like he holds his hand up for a high five or fist bump, but she doesn't get what he's doing. So yeah, using that kind of juxtaposition of contemporary Britain with ancient China and how each can learn from each other, that creates some of the humour as well.
Book 1 is published in July. I know that there are at least another 2 coming, probably more as well. Without giving us too much, can you say a little bit about what books 2 and 3 will be about, the kind of general idea?
The second book is about fox demons, and I have written about Japanese fox demons before. They're called kitsune in Japan. You get them in Korean culture as well, and there's a special one called the nine-tailed fox. So if listeners know Pokemon, there is a Pokemon called the nine-tailed fox. So the baddie for the second book is the nine-tailed fox, and she's got a massive fox army. And that takes place at the Summer Palace, which is a slightly different. Usually it's the Jade Kingdom and the village, but this is in the Summer Palace, which is in the countryside. And then the third book is around the Nian character, the New Year's. You might have heard the New Year's Eve story about this creature, Nian, because Nian means year in Chinese, in Mandarin. And he's a ferocious beast with fangs and he eats children. And Jack,
great for a children's
book,
Maisie.
Jack has to stop him on Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year, from devouring the village. So that one's quite tense, to be honest.
Exciting though. You mentioned Pokemon there. Are there quite a few connections between Chinese myth and the creatures in Pokemon?
Some. So if you look at even language, so if you look at characters, Japanese characters that they write with, they've got kanji, which is this sort of single or, not many lines. And then they've got the Chinese letters that they use. So over time, and Korea as well, then language and culture has been moved from different country to different country. So you often find that these myths, and like even dragons that I mentioned earlier, myths have traveled from different, China to Japan and back again, or to Korea, Vietnam. So you do see a lot of similar kind of creatures. They might call them something else, but there is quite a lot of overlap. And when I was writing stories from around the world, I did see that there was lots of commonalities between countries. So I did a story on Maui. And even though Polynesia spread out, they would all have these different Maui legends. And some had very similar beginnings, even though they were totally different islands, 1,000 miles apart, but they had these Maui stories that were very similar. And it's the same with Chinese mythology and some Japanese mythology, where you'll have very similar creatures. Yeah.
You've also talked quite a lot about the kind of female characters, and they seem to be quite active and have a lot of agency. Do you feel that that's a difference between Chinese mythology and how sort of more European fairy stories have developed and evolved?
So we had Mulan, who was, she went to war for her father and pretended to be him. And then growing up, I grew up watching lots of martial arts movies, and some of them would be set in like ancient China. And sometimes you would get a female character that was like a martial arts expert, and like Michelle Yeoh had a film called The Heroic Trio, which was 3 women. I think it was Anita Mui, Maggie Chung, and Michelle Yeoh. And I remember watching that sort of the early 90s, and they had strong kick butt women. So I think in Chinese culture that there has been that in the movies and in some books as well, which goes against some of the other, Chinese views of women. You had people that used to have bind their feet and the concubines and all that sort of stuff. So Yeah, there has been and there was a pirate. There's this Chinese pirate who was female, one of the most successful pirates ever. I can't remember her name, but she was Chinese as well. You know, she commanded this massive fleet of pirates. So I'd like to write about her, actually. So I think there have been examples of women like that in Chinese mythology and legend. Yeah.
Fascinating. I could talk to you about myth and legend all day. It seems like you've got so much bubbling away there, and you just sound so full of things that you'd like to share. But I'd like to give just a moment to your other novel that's coming out very soon, which is Danny Chung Does Not Do Maths.
Correct.
Why doesn't he do maths?
So he's an artist. He loves to draw comics, and the book is sort of playing on that model minority stereotype that all Chinese people are good at maths. And his parents, like lots of parents, not just Chinese parents, want him to do well and be academic. I think that's a theme that lots of children face. And he doesn't want to do maths. And one of his comics is called Danny Chung Does Not Do Maths, because he draws it during a maths class. Instead of doing his lesson, he's like drawing what he draws what he could be doing instead of maths. So that's why the book's called Danny Chung Does Not Do Maths.
And full of humour and rooted in the real world, and relates a lot to many children's lives. How much of you is in Danny Chung? Did you like maths, or would you have preferred to be drawing a comic?
I won my first art competition when I was 5 years old in reception class, and I won £5. So I think, naturally I was more drawn to the arts and writing, but I was all right at maths. I could do it. I got a B at GCSE maths, but I don't remember any of it now. Like if I have to add up stuff, it doesn't come quickly to me because my brain has just pushed it out. So I think, I think Danny's a little bit like me in that he's more naturally an artist. And I'm from Birmingham, and the book's set in a sort of suburb of Birmingham, a fictional suburb of Birmingham. And it's about belonging. And I think when I was writing it, I didn't realise how much there was of me in it until I look into it now, and I'm like, oh, actually, yeah. And it's about his grandmother too, that comes from China, and she moves into his room and she takes the top bunk of his bed.
I know.
Yeah, she's terrible.
That's a big no-no.
Yeah.
Take the bottom bunk.
So it's about his relationship with her. Most of the book follows his relationship, and he has to look after her during the Easter holiday. So obviously, if you're an 11-year-old boy, you don't really want to be taking your granny around with you. So it's about him finding her things to do, and he takes her to bingo.
Oh, that's lovely. One other thing I'd just like to mention, that's the work that you've done through setting up bubble tea writers, because there aren't that many Southeast Asian British writers at the moment, are there? So you've actually done some work to change that.
Yeah. So it all started in 2018, and I'd been mentored for a whole year, and I thought, what can I do to help create more British Chinese, British East Asian writers? And I offered on Twitter to mentor someone for a year. And those people that applied said to me, oh, usually we're alone. We don't know another British Chinese writer. So could you make a Facebook group for us where we can all get together and get to know each other? And I was like, oh, yeah, sure, And so I created this space. So it's a private Facebook group called Bubble Tea Writers Network. And I just used bubble tea because it was like a quick image that you kind of know it means East Asian. And now there's about 130 writers in there. So you need to be based in the UK, you need to be interested in writing and of East Asian or Southeast Asian heritage, and you can just join. And I post every week or so, I post opportunities for writers that I see on Twitter or on other Facebook pages. And it's a place where you can ask questions. So often I'll ask a question. If I don't know something specific about Chinese culture, I can ask people that might know more than me. It's also a place where you can share your workshops or your publications and get support for your work. And sometimes we've met up. So in London, we've had a couple dim sum meetings in London, Chinatown, and that's been really nice. So yeah, it's great just to have this kind of online community.
And do you see many people on that journey to publication? I'm sure that's not the only reason that people join the group, but are we seeing more people coming through, getting closer to publication and being published?
Yeah, so the last few weeks, I've had some calls from a couple of the writers, and I think 2 of them got agent offers. So that's been really exciting. And I know there's a few children's writers that I've read their work, and I mentored one of them for a year, Louis Sitt. So I'm hoping that there's a few more people, especially children's writers, that can get agents and then publish. But it takes years. But it's nice to hear that people are getting interest from agents. Yeah.
Well, it's been joyous talking to you as well today, Maisie. Thank you so much for joining me in the Reading Corner.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
In the Reading Corner is presented by Nikki Gamble and produced by Alison Hughes. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please do leave a review for us. To find out about other projects, including an audience with events and the Exploring Children's Literature Summer School, visit www.exploringchildrensliterature.uk. Join us again soon in the Reading Corner on your favourite podcast platform.